What would you do if 12 million pounds suddenly landed in your lap? Would you scream it from the rooftops or keep it locked away as your darkest secret? What I did shocked even me. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 29 years old, and last Tuesday flipped my entire world upside down. I scanned my lottery ticket, and every single number lined up perfectly. 12 millions, mine. For a moment, my chest felt like it would explode. But instead of celebrating, an unusual decision popped into my mind. I would tell absolutely no one. You might be wondering why. The truth is, money has always been a sore spot with the people around me, and this win would only make it worse. Before I dive into this unbelievable story of loyalty, jealousy, and betrayal, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. You won't want to miss what happened next. Before that Tuesday, my life was nothing special. I worked as a graphic designer at a small marketing agency in Bristol, earning just enough to survive, but never enough to feel secure. My one-bedroom flat on the city's edge was simple, but at least it was mine. Each day was the same. Up at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, anxiety about bills gnawing at me before logging into another 60-hour work week. Work wasn't just stressful, it was messy. My boss, Arthur, used to teach high school art before turning his side hustle into a company. He married Charlotte, a real estate agent who lived like every day was a luxury brand ad. Then there was David, my colleague, a brilliant illustrator married to Emily, a gallery owner who counted every pound twice before spending. I had two junior teammates. Liam, 23, was the golden child, fresh from a prestigious university, already married to a stockbroker named Olivia, with a dream house and two picture-perfect kids. On the other hand, Alex, my senior colleague, had all the charm but none of the stability. He drifted from project to project and had a habit of borrowing money with heartfelt promises to repay that never materialized. The only truly authentic person in my circle was Marcus, my mentor and former art director. He lived modestly, scraping by as a freelance photographer, driving a rattling Morris Minor, and surrounding himself with books and canvases. Yet he always showed up when it counted. In stark contrast stood Helen, a wealthy client who thrived on reminding everyone how superior her life was. Every meeting turned into a showcase of her judgment. My modest apartment, my single status, my career choices, nothing escaped her critiques. Her son, Mark, was even worse. Spoiled, entitled, and hiding a gambling habit everyone at the company pretended wasn't there. And now, with 12 million pounds in my pocket and a secret burning in my chest, I realized one thing. This win wasn't just going to change my life. It was about to expose everyone else's true colors. My history with financial assistance in the company had left me jaded. When Alex needed 5,000 pounds for equipment 3 years ago, I emptied my modest savings account to help him, only to discover months later that he had never actually bought the equipment. When Liam needed help with his wedding costs, I put 2,000 pounds on my credit card that he promised to pay back after the honeymoon. 5 years later, I was still waiting. When Arthur needed a loan to repair his studio after a flood, I sent what I could, only to see photos of him and Charlotte vacationing in the Maldives the following month. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend, Sarah. We had met in university, and unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained constant. Sarah worked as a doctor, understood struggle, and never judged my complicated feelings about my colleagues. She was the voice of reason when I felt myself becoming bitter, reminding me that not everyone was out to take advantage of me. At work, things were not much better. My boss, Arnold, had a habit of taking credit for my ideas during meetings with clients. My colleague Derek consistently left early, leaving me to pick up his slack, yet somehow always managed to get the recognition I deserved. Despite being underappreciated, I kept my head down and continued to work diligently, hoping someday it would pay off. Buying raffle tickets was my one small indulgence, a weekly ritual that my colleagues loved to tease me about. Every Friday, I would stop at the corner pub and spend £5 on tickets. My boss called it a tax on people who can't do math. My senior colleague joked that I should just give him the money directly instead of wasting it. My boss lectured me about probability and statistics. But there was something hopeful about those tickets, a tiny chance at freedom that I could not bring myself to give up, even as years passed without winning more than £20 here and there. I had dreams, of course. I wanted to travel, to see places beyond the UK. I wanted to go back to school, maybe get a Master of Fine Arts degree in something I was actually passionate about. I wanted to have enough savings that an unexpected car repair would not send me into a financial tailspin. But these dreams seemed increasingly distant as I approached my late 20s, still paying off student loans and carrying a small but persistent credit card debt that never seemed to diminish despite my careful budgeting. Each month was a careful balancing act of bills, groceries, and the occasional dinner out with Sarah. I clipped coupons, compared prices, and knew exactly which store had the best deal on everything from toilet paper to coffee. I drove a 10-year-old Vauxhall Corsa that made a concerning noise when it rained, but could not afford to replace it. I had mastered the art of appearing perfectly fine while constantly calculating costs in my head, wondering if I could afford to say yes to an invitation, or if I needed to invent an excuse to stay home. This was my life before everything changed. Ordinary, sometimes difficult, occasionally lonely, but stable in its own way. I had no idea how a single piece of paper was about to completely upend everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called colleagues. The day I bought the winning ticket was actually my 29th birthday. I had just finished a particularly grueling week at work where Arthur had once again taken credit for my design strategy that saved a major client thousands of pounds. I stopped at the Green Dragon pub as I did every Friday, but this time with a slight variation in my routine. "Happy birthday, Jules." The bartender, a kind older man who had owned the pub for over 30 years, called out as I entered. He knew all his regular customers by name and always had a friendly word to share. "Thanks, Gus. The usual, please, and maybe one extra for good luck," I replied, handing him £6 instead of my typical £5. "Birthday splurge, huh? Maybe today is your lucky day," he said with a wink as he handed me my tickets. Instead of my usual quick pick, I decided on a whim to choose my own numbers. I selected my birth month and day, 10 and 3, Arthur's birthday, 18, Liam's birthday, 25, Marcus's birthday, 9, and Sarah's birthday, 14. 6 numbers that represented the most important people in my life, even those who had disappointed me. That evening, I ordered takeout from my favorite Indian restaurant, opened a bottle of wine Sarah had given me as a birthday gift, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The raffle drawing was at 9 p.m., but I barely paid attention as I scrolled through social media, seeing posts from acquaintances enjoying far more exciting birthday celebrations than mine. At 9:15, I remembered the tickets and lazily picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as usual. The first number matched 10. I smiled slightly. The second matched 3. My heart rate picked up just a bit. Third number, 18. Fourth, 25. By now, my palms were sweating. Fifth number, 9. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final number, 14. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity. This could not be right. I must have read something wrong. I checked again and again. I turned on the television and rewound to the live drawing. I watched as each of my numbers appeared on the screen, one after another. My hands shook so badly I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered to the empty flat. No way. According to the raffle website, I was the sole winner of £12 million. After taxes, it would be somewhere around £8 million. An unfathomable sum for someone who had been excited earlier that day about a 50% off coupon for laundry detergent. I did not sleep at all that night. Instead, I spent hours researching raffle winners online. What I found was disturbing. Stories of winners whose lives fell apart after their windfall. Professional teams torn apart by greed. Friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners who were bankrupt within 5 years, more miserable than before they had won. One article called the raffle the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun rose, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my boss, not my colleagues, not even Sarah. At least not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to understand what this money would mean for my life before everyone else tried to tell me what to do with it. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years and made an appointment with Philip Montgomery, a solicitor specializing in financial planning and corporate law. His office was in a downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the waiting room in my ordinary clothes, clutching my purse with the winning ticket inside, I felt like an imposter. "Mr. Vance?" Philip greeted me, extending his hand. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone finding out it was me." His eyes widened briefly as he examined the ticket. Then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you have come to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, Philip explained my options. In our country, raffle winners could claim prizes through trusts or legal entities that would keep their identities private. He outlined the process of setting up a blind trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to help manage such a large sum. The biggest mistake winners make, he told me, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there is no going back. I nodded, relieved that my instinct had been correct. I want to do this right. I don't want this money to ruin my life. As I left Philip's office with a folder full of documents and a list of next steps, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I had more money than I had ever dreamed of. Yet I could not share this life-changing news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same struggling graphic designer while secretly being a multi-millionaire. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Philip to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I would never have to worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was real now, sitting in accounts under my control. Yet my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work, still complained about bills with coworkers, still drove my old Vauxhall Corsa. The secrecy was starting to weigh on me. I found myself wondering about my colleagues. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries? Or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions haunted me, and gradually an idea began to form. What if there was a way to find out how my colleagues would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who to share my secret with? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each professional contact with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be part of my new life. The next day, I met with Philip again to ensure my finances were properly secured before proceeding with my plan. We had established a diverse investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but me. "Everything is in order, Julian," Philip assured me, sliding a folder across his polished desk. "Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to." The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions. I was not ready to answer. "I think I'll stay at my job for now," I replied, "at least until I figure some things out." That evening, I invited Sarah over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I could not keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone. "I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my professional network," I began carefully. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of experiment?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them I lost my biggest client and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it." Sarah's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Jules, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it," I said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned." "But lying to test people, that doesn't sound like you." Sarah set down her wine glass. "Why not just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation." I laughed without humor. Right? Because my colleagues are so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Sarah. You've seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though that was not entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource. Sarah shook her head. I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind. She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story, making sure it was believable, but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the advertising agency I worked for had suddenly lost its biggest clients. I would say I needed £5,000 to cover rent and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most of my colleagues. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. Arthur would probably offer some help, but less than I needed. David would lecture me about financial responsibility, but might send a small amount. Liam would claim he could not help due to the kids' expenses. Alex would definitely say he had no money. Charlotte and Emily would refuse outright. Helen would judge me for my poor life choices. My junior partner, Mark, would promise help that would never materialize. The only person I had real hope for was Marcus. Despite having the least to give, he had always been the most generous with what he had. But even with him, I tried to keep my expectations low. £5,000 was a lot of money for a freelance photographer living alone. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each professional contact individually, tell them the same story, and see who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my raffle win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me beyond what I could do for them. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to find out who my real professional network was. I decided to call my boss, Arthur, first. Arthur had always prided himself on being a nurturing mentor, frequently reminding us how he had sacrificed his own dreams to build the agency. If anyone would help, I thought it would be him. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed his number. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Arthur," I said intentionally, making my voice sound strained. "Julian, is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my prepared story, telling him about the company suddenly losing clients, the lost wages, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear his breathing change, growing more concerned with each detail. "Oh, my boy, that is terrible," he said when I finished. "Have you applied for benefits? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that benefits would take weeks to process, and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent medical tests for some concerning symptoms. I did not specify what the symptoms were, allowing his imagination to fill in the blanks. "I hate to ask this, Arthur, but I need help. About £5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I can find something new. I promise I will pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, Julian, you know, Charlotte and I just put a down payment on a villa in Spain. We are pretty cash poor right now." His voice took on a slightly defensive tone. "Have you asked David or Liam? Olivia makes good money as a stockbroker." "I was hoping to avoid asking David," I said truthfully, "and Liam has the kids in their private school tuition." "Well, let me talk to Charlotte and see what we can do," he said finally. "But I cannot promise anything. You know how tight she is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know." I did know. Charlotte had never considered me her responsibility, making it clear from the beginning that her money was for my boss and any ventures they might have had together. They never did. "Sure, Arthur. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent is due next week." "I will, my boy, and I'm so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable." After hanging up, I noted his response in a journal I had started for this purpose. He had expressed concern, but immediately looked for ways to pass the responsibility to someone else. He had not outright refused, but I suspected his conversation with Charlotte would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day, I met my colleague, David, for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain details. When I finished by asking for help with the 5,000 pounds, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Julian, I have always taught you about professional responsibility," he began, slipping into his illustrator's voice. "This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, David," I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that flat in that neighborhood? What about your streaming subscriptions?" For the next 15 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. "I would love to help you, Julian, but Emily and I are focusing on our art gallery right now. We cannot afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible." He patted my hand patronizingly. "This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My younger colleague, Liam, was next. I drove to his beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. His husband, Olivia, was golfing, giving us privacy to talk. "Julian, what a surprise!" he exclaimed when he opened the door. "The kids are at their swimming lessons. Come in." His house was immaculate, with expensive furniture and framed professional family photos on every wall. As we sat in his gourmet kitchen sipping lattes from his commercial-grade espresso machine, I told him about my situation. "Oh my God, that is awful," he gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. "I cannot believe they would just lose a client like that." "Poor you." His sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing to borrow 5,000 pounds. "Oh," he said, his expression shifting slightly. "Well, this is actually not a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month, and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we are redoing the master bathroom." He glanced around nervously. "Olivia handles most of our finances, and she is really strict about our budget." "I understand," I said quietly. "I would not ask if I was not desperate." I know, he said quickly. "Let me talk to Olivia and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount. Or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room is being used for storage right now, but we could clear it out." I thanked him for the offer, but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search centered in the city. He promised to call me after speaking with Olivia, but the way he avoided eye contact told me all I needed to know. My senior colleague, Alex, was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message. "That sucks, mate. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later." He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered, and when I tried calling him directly, the calls went straight to voicemail. This from the same colleague who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. My business associate, Helen, was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pretense of sympathy. "Julian, I am sure this is difficult, but Mark and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your flat or getting a flatmate?" When I pointed out that I had helped them with repairs to their corporate headquarters last year, she bristled. "That was different. That was a business property that you also enjoy using." The fact that I had only been invited to the headquarters once in 2 years apparently did not matter. My junior partner, Mark, was even worse. "You are not my business partner," he said plainly when I called. "I have supported your boss for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path." My junior partner, Mark, initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted an hour before saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did, and eventually stopped responding to my messages altogether. My business associate, Helen, was perhaps the least surprising, but still painful. "Well, Julian, I always said that agency of yours seemed unstable. I told your boss you should have taken that job at the bank after university, but no one listens to me." She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other colleagues had experienced and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had heard from Liam that Helen was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my professional network, but the reality was still painful to accept. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years could not or would not return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Jules, mate, I just heard from a mutual friend about the client. Are you okay?" His voice was warm with genuine concern. I had not actually reached out to Marcus yet, planning to call him the next day. The fact that he had called me first after hearing about my situation secondhand spoke volumes. "I am hanging in there," I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. "Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small cafe near his flat. Marcus looked exactly as he always did, his silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. He hugged me tightly before we sat down. "I am so sorry about your client, sweetheart. That agency never deserved you anyway." As we ate, he asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, he reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," he said, sliding it across the table. "It is £5,000. I know it is not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least." I stared at the envelope in shock. "Marcus, I cannot take this. This is too much." "Nonsense. Professionals help professionals. And I want you to know something else." He reached across the table and took my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It is not fancy, but you are welcome to stay as long as you need to." Tears filled my eyes, and this time they were completely genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by his generosity. "Now, do not you worry about paying this back right away," he continued. "Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that does not appreciate you." As we left the cafe, Marcus hugged me again. "You are going to be okay, Jules. You are smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road." Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing £5,000, more money than I knew Marcus could comfortably spare. The contrast between his response and the rest of my colleagues could not have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Marcus, I did some research that left me stunned. £5,000 represented nearly all of his savings, and I discovered that he had been quietly dealing with complications from type 2 diabetes. His medication costs had recently increased, and he had been picking up extra photography work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, who had so little, had given me almost everything he had without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my boss, Arthur, who had recently spent £20,000 on a kitchen renovation, could not spare £5,000 to help his employee with rent and medical bills. The next day, I invited Marcus to my flat for dinner. As he settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how tired he looked, the fine lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," I began, setting a cup of tea in front of him. "I have not been completely honest with you." His expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. "What is it, mate?" "I did not lose my client. The agency is fine. I still have my position." The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story to see who in my professional network would help me if I needed it. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I see." "Are you angry with me?" I asked suddenly, afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. No, not angry. Sad, maybe sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. She took a sip of her tea, but added, I understand why you did it. Our professional network has not always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help, I told him. Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely. Marcus sighed. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself. What do you mean? He set down his cup and folded his hands in his lap. My ex-wife, Sarah. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced? I shook my head. The professional story had always been vague. Something about growing apart. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died. About 50,000 pounds, not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Sarah immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in her friend's business ventures. He smiled ruefully. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small home eventually. We fought about it for months. One day, I discovered she had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. He shook his head at the memory. When I confronted her, do you know what she said? That it was our money, not just mine, and she had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea. The professional network preferred the growing apart story, less messy. He reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and it is a painful lesson. I am so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing his hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. He looked at me intently. Money does not just reveal who others truly are, Julian. It reveals who we are too, how we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It is a powerful mirror. His words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Marcus, there is something else I need to tell you. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the raffle 3 weeks ago, 12 million pounds. His eyes widened, but he remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I have not told anyone else, not my boss, not Liam or Alex, not even Sarah. You are the first to know. Oh, Julian, he breathed. That is life-changing. I know, and that is why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That is what I am trying to figure out. The money is secure and I have good financial advisors, but I do not know how to handle the professional network. Marcus considered this. You know you do not owe anyone anything, Julian. Not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical expenses, a better flat. Whatever you need. He smiled gently. I do not need anything from you, mate. I am happy with my life. My flat is small, but it is full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my art, and now this wonderful secret with my favorite protege. He patted my hand. Just knowing you are secure and happy would be enough for me. His selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything he had when he thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when he knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Marcus and the rest of my professional network became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the professional network about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss. Heard you asked Liam for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you are playing us against each other. Another came from my colleague, David. Charlotte tells me you have been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The professional network had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to show compassion, and in doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Marcus, I met with Philip to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my professional relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my mentor, Marcus, I told him. Something that will cover his medical expenses and provide him with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. He is very proud. Philip nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a professional trust that provides a monthly stipend. He would not have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy him a small flat near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my design job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly artists living alone, inspired by Marcus's situation and the many others like him. What about the rest of your professional network? Philip asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now, maybe not ever, but I do want to arrange a professional meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Sarah and finally told her the truth about everything, the raffle win and the professional experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I am not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with Marcus. He deserves it. Sarah agreed. And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test? I am still figuring that out. I have called a professional meeting for this weekend. Summer Saf, I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my flat. Arthur and Charlotte, David and Emily, Liam and Olivia, even Alex, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Helen arrived with a disapproving frown already in place. Marcus came last, giving me a secret smile as he entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. Alex suddenly became very interested in his phone. Liam and Olivia exchanged glances. The truth is, I am fine. I have found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. I will be transitioning to that position next month. Well, that is wonderful news, Arthur said with obvious relief. We have all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again, or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So why all the drama about needing money? My colleague David asked, his tone accusatory. Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up? I met his gaze steadily. The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my professional network. That is what a professional network is supposed to be for, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Helen said defensively. It is not always possible to help even when we want to. Of course, I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Alex. Speaking of which, Alex, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet, you had no problem asking me for $5,000 last Christmas for your business. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I was going through some stuff, and I did not have any money to give you. You did not even call me back, I pointed out. That would have been free. The meeting continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had not told them about the raffle win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Marcus stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. You did well, he said quietly. That could not have been easy. It was actually easier than I expected, I replied. For the first time, I was not afraid of disappointing them because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Marcus smiled. That is a powerful realization. So, what happens next? Next, I said, we start looking at flats for both of us. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching raffle numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was Marcus's new flat, a single-story bungalow with wide doorways to accommodate his walker on the days his diabetes made walking difficult. My nonprofit organization had grown beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly artists living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their professional networks. The work was rewarding in a way my design career had never been, and we had already helped over 100 artists in our city. Sarah had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her medical expertise and compassionate nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly pub nights, Cuis Me, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped flat. My relationship with my former colleagues had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my raffle winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything I needed to know about their interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Alex called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Liam complained about the cost of his kitchen renovation. But each time I remembered the silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when colleagues genuinely needed assistance. When my boss, Arthur, had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my senior partner, Mark, finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Marcus and I had dinner together at least twice a week. His health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. He had retired from art direction but volunteered at a community art program 3 days a week, still sharing his love of art with children who needed it. "You know what still amazes me?" he said one evening as we sat on his porch watching the sunset. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your raffle win right away." I nodded. Considering this alternate reality, the professional network would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. "And you would never have known what was real," Marcus added. "That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom." He was right. The experiment had been painful but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who did not. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen, despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the raffle, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others. Constantly trying to earn respect through sacrifice and generosity, I had allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what a professional network meant, what loyalty required. Now I understood that real loyalty, the kind Marcus had shown me, did not keep a balance sheet. It gave freely without expectation of return, but it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them, instead stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Marcus and Sarah, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone, but so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. Marcus reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. You did good, mate. Not just with the money, but with what you learned. I smiled at him, overwhelmed with gratitude for this man who had shown me what loyalty truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the shock of those matching numbers, to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening, and may you find the clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.